your head hung low, your sky's a shade of gray. Cause it's just a dead man walking, thinking that's your only option. But you can flip the switch and brighten up your darkest days. Sun is up and the colors blinded. Take the world and redefine it. Leave behind your narrow mind, you'll never be the same. When the world becomes a fantasy and you're more than you could ever be, cause you dream it with your eyes wide open. So come alive.
Aren't you proud of me, Mr. Disney?
Well, I'm so proud, I think I'll bust. Anyone who's searching for a way to break free. You'll be dreaming with your eyes wide open. This is the greatest show. Dreaming with
Oh, a million dreams for the world I'm gonna make.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
I will post that to eCourseWare, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, if you haven't looked, there are a lot more of the links and videos that we've talked about on eCourseWare now, if you want to take a look at those. So, few things. First, what'd you think of the movie? It was okay? How many people knew the story of A Wrinkle in Time? I didn't. So I had heard some of the critiques and what people said about it. I didn't fully understand the story, but I didn't think it was as bad as some other people, apparently did, that I read their comments online. What we are scheduled to talk about for the next 3 weeks are the parks, okay? And on April 9th, I was able to communicate with Lou, so on April 9th, we again will meet in the conference room, and we're going to speak to Lou Mangello. So, he was one of the people featured in the documentary The Dreamfinders also. He was the one who talked about moving down from New Jersey, being a lawyer and an IT consultant. And so, leading up to April 9th, I would go on, you can go on Facebook and you can follow, his Facebook page is WDW Radio with Lou Mangello. You could do a little bit of research on him, because what he's going to talk about is his journey moving down to Orlando, and some of the things that he's done. But he's also going to talk about things he's done that have kind of branched out from Disney as well. He does a lot of talks, a lot of consulting on social media and engaging people using new media. And so I think he's going to talk to us a little bit about that as well. So, just like we did with Ron, do your research, look into him, come ready with questions that you want to ask him, okay? Because he is a person, as you saw in the documentary, he is a person who he wanted to live there. He wanted to go to the parks all the time, and him and his family moved down there, and now he's pretty successful at what he's able to do, and I think you can watch his weekly radio show on Facebook. He Facebook Lives it Wednesday nights, so be pretty interesting to see. So what I would like to do today is, when we talk about the parks, most of my reference comes from Walt Disney World. Okay, so Ron talked about Disneyland and Disneyland being opened, and some of the issues surrounding Disneyland. Some of the more interesting things to me are when the Walt Disney Company was building Disneyland, they actually created a show on ABC called Disneyland, and that's the revenue from that. That's what they used to build the park. 1971 is when Walt Disney World opened. So Walt Disney himself announced the opening shortly before his death. Or I'm sorry, he announced the project shortly before his death. He didn't see the opening. But it was supposed to be a park or a place where people could visit the park or parks, different recreation opportunities. And his big focus was actually Epcot, which was the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And his original purpose for this, and you can look this up on YouTube, if you look at Walt Disney Epcot introduction, they did a Wonderful World of Color on it when he was still living, and this is where he gave a lot of his information on what his vision of Epcot was. It was going to be a living, working community where people lived. It was going to be centered around business and retail. People were going to use monorails to travel around. They were going to use people movers to travel around the inner city portion of Epcot. After his death, Walt Disney Imagineering at that time focused on the Magic Kingdom. The Magic Kingdom is a larger version of Disneyland. However, I'm told it doesn't have as much attractions as Disneyland. But it's a larger version of Disneyland. When they opened in 1971, they had the Magic Kingdom, they had the Polynesian Resort, and then they had the Contemporary Resort. And if you've been to the Magic Kingdom, and if you've ridden the monorail, you ride on the way to Disney World or on the way to Magic Kingdom, you ride through the Contemporary Resort on the monorail. So those were the three things that opened in 1971. When Epcot opened in the early 80s, it was not the original vision of what Walt Disney had as far as people living and working there to a large extent. It was more of a theme park, which is what we see today, where it has Future World, which is where you see Spaceship Earth, the big globe in front of the park, and then they also have World Showcase. World Showcase, when it opened, featured, I believe, seven countries. Now, I believe, houses 8 countries, with room to expand if they are going to add more countries. One aspect of his vision of people living and working at Epcot did come true, because in the World Showcase, they have people from those countries that come and they live on Walt Disney property, and then they work in those pavilions in the World Showcase as their exchange program, as part of their exchange program. So, I believe it was 1989, MGM Studios opened. At that time, about that time, there were rumors of Universal, who had a very successful park in Hollywood, moving to Florida. There are rumors as to Universal accused Michael Eisner and Disney of stealing plans for MGM from Universal. However, there are also rumors that Universal actually was stealing plans from what was MGM at the time. MGM later became what we know now as Hollywood Studios, because they changed the title sponsorship. And then the most recent main theme park to open at Disney World has been Animal Kingdom. And has anyone been to Animal Kingdom? Okay, so Animal Kingdom, when it opened, was supposed to represent, it was an homage to live animals and fantasy animals. So if you look at the logo, Google the logo of Animal Kingdom, if you look at the logo, there's actually dragons on there. There's a dragon on there, because that was going to be the imaginary creatures. There was going to be a land dedicated to dragons. That did not come to fruition. However, last year, what did open at Animal Kingdom? Disney secured the rights to Avatar, and I believe 2009, 2010, started building Pandora, the world of Avatar. So that opened there last year. And so that kind of, people have said is, now there are imaginary creatures at Animal Kingdom. However, there are a lot of rumors with what's going to happen with things at Epcot, in Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. One of the rumors is possibly at Animal Kingdom, there may be an Indiana Jones land. If they want to ever repurpose the Dino USA land, they would try to repurpose that into an Indiana Jones land. There's also been a rumor of possibly adding an Australia themed portion of the park. We've seen some of the things that have happened at Epcot, as far as the Norway Pavilion. The ride in the Norway Pavilion was repurposed in 2016 to be the Frozen ride, which is a very popular attraction there. The Universe of Energy is being repurposed. They're building their first roller coaster at Epcot for Guardians of the Galaxy. And then there's been a constant rumor of what's going to happen with the Imagination Pavilion, which is where Ron Schneider worked when we talked to him in here. And so the latest rumor is that if they want to do something with that, possibly turning it into an inside-out themed area. Whereas Figment would still be present and then possibly be the mascot of the park, if you will. When Epcot first opened, there were no Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, Pluto. There were no other characters in the park except for Figment and the Dreamfinder. That changed when Michael Eisner came in as CEO, and they recognized the just marketing potential that they had to have those other characters in the park as well. In the 80s, Disney started planning on constructing Euro Disney, which is now Disneyland Paris. Disneyland Paris, when it opened, and throughout its history, has been seen as really one of the few parks that has struggled financially. And where it was built outside of Paris, and a lot of people living in the area protested because they were using farmland to build the park. People protested that it was cultural imperialism to bring in Walt Disney into Paris and kind of tell the American story in Paris. Some of the later parks in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Disney was more aware and more sensitive to these issues. Whereas if you go to one of the parks now, you'll see a more, or at least what historians would say, a more culturally sensitive approach to the countries where they're built. So, as I said, most of my experience and knowledge comes about Walt Disney World. And so what I would like to do is, we'll watch a few of the videos. If you're on YouTube, you want to look on YouTube and search for Shark Productions. They're a company. There's a lot of companies like this, but they're really, really good. That they travel around the different amusement parks and they video the rides on amusement parks. So if you ever want to pass time looking for that, look for Shark Productions. They have them about Disney World, Disneyland, but they also have Universal Studios and the different amusement parks around the country and some around the world. So some of the things that I would like to show, some of my favorite rides or the classic rides, I think, that'll actually show up well, is Splash Mountain. Has anyone been on Splash Mountain? Okay. What movie is Splash Mountain based around? Anyone remember? It used to be featured in the Civil Rights Museum here in downtown. It was based after a movie called Song of the South. Has anyone ever heard of Song of the South? Has anyone ever seen Song of the South? I imagine people have not seen Song of the South because it's not.
A little bit about it, but it was not positive.
Yeah, it is. Song of the South is not. You cannot readily watch Song of the South in the United States. Song of the South was an attempt by Walt Disney when he was living to tell a story. I can't remember the writer or the author of the story, but it was about life in the South during, I forget exactly which decades, but it was during slavery. And so the story received a lot of backlash because of the content, because of the time period that it was portrayed in, and because of the story being a cheerful story. A lot of people felt that placed the wrong message on what was happening in the United States at that time regarding slavery. And however, some of the most some of the very, very popular characters come from that movie. If you ever heard of Brer Rabbit, Brer Bear, or you've ever heard Zippity Doo Dah, that song, those come from this movie. And so this was one of their thrill attractions when they opened it in the 90s. Oh, let me go to the right one, I guess. Here it is. And we'll try to skip through the... There we go. So this is a log flume ride. And it's through the world of Brer Bear and Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit, who were featured in the movie. And when this ride was built, the movie was not being shown in the United States, so there are no clear references made to the movie other than the characters. So the live action humans, they're not portrayed on this ride. Rather, the cartoon characters are portrayed on the ride. When Splash Mountain was built, I believe it was the tallest mountain in the state of Florida. And it's one of 3 mountains at Walt Disney World. Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Railroad Mountain, and Space Mountain. And there is a rumor for another mountain at Walt Disney World, possibly surrounding the story of Moana. Also, another reason I use this is look at the animatronics. So this ride was open in the early 90s. I want you to pay attention to these animatronics and some of the videos that we'll watch later or next time. What?
Nothing. Is he gonna go down another mountain?
No, that was the big drop. Remember, this is one thing that.
This is early 90s.
Well, but also one thing that Disney has always. This is a family ride,
Yeah.
so they want smaller children to be able to go on it. So unlike Universal, who goes after more of the thrill seeker, the thrill rides, Disney builds their rides around the themes and telling the story. What? Yeah. I mean, every once in a while you'll hit conveyor belts and everything, but there's your bigger drop. There's another drop if you need it. So this right here, the show's finale, and we refer to them as shows because they call the ride shows. So that is an existing, it was a portion of a riverboat. So that gives a little idea of the scale of that place where this is. Obviously not a big one, but, and also if you're riding the Walt Disney World Railroad, you're riding over top of all this so you can see the final scene of this. So see, it tells the story of Brer Fox trying to find adventure. Brer Rabbit trying to find adventure. Brer Fox and Brer Bear, the adventures that they had in those stories. And where this came from was in the movie Song of the South. The leading character, the protagonist, was a older man who lived on the property who would tell the small kid stories, and he would use these characters in his stories. So that's where all of these characters came from. So now for a ride that was open on opening day. How many people have been on Peter Pan's flight? So this is a very interesting ride in that first the queue, they redid the queue about, I don't know how many years ago, where you walk through their bedroom. And now you're actually on a track above, and in places there's a track below, but it looks like you're flying over London, Neverland, and so they used the perspective, you can see, so it looks like you're tall above London. You're about 10 to 12 feet off of the ground. Okay, so this was open 1971 when they opened Walt Disney World. Still is one of the most popular rides at Disney World. Say it louder.
What are they saying?
You're riding in a like a pirate ship. It's about 3 people can fit in a pirate ship, 4 if you have smaller kids. so you get a view of the ride car. Now, one thing I want to point out here, see where you're getting out, there's a moving walkway. A lot of the rides, especially the earlier rides at Walt Disney World, would have moving walkways. They did that because that was an innovative way to cut down on wait times. So it kept from having to stop the car, letting people get on, and then start the car back up, which ultimately could lead to more issues. So, if you're ever on a Disney World ride that uses a walking or a walkway, and your car stops, that's probably because someone trying to get on or off needed the car to stop to be able to get on the ride car, okay? An interesting website that I would like to point out, and I can post this on eCourseware also, is touringplans.com. And what's really neat about here is it gives, for Magic Kingdom, it gives the opening day for at least the major attractions that we see at Magic Kingdom. And then if you click on each one of these, so I believe people know it's a small world. An interesting thing about this ride is this was actually an adaptation of a ride the Walt Disney Corporation produced for the 1964 New York World's Fair. In association with Pepsi and UNICEF, they produced a ride to feature the children of the world. And so Walt Disney used the 1964 World's Fair to test out new technology. One of these was It's a Small World, which was later moved to Disneyland in Anaheim. Another attraction, has anyone ever been to the Carousel of Progress? The Carousel of Progress in Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom is the Carousel of Progress that was at the New York World Fair. It was an animatronic, it was a theater in which the crowd, the seats were actually on, they would rotate around the scenes. So the scenes would rotate, the seats rotate, that's why it's called the Carousel of Progress. And it showed one setting in the 1800s, at the turn of the 1900s, one setting in about, I think it was the 40s, one a little bit sooner, and then one that's supposed to be kind of a future representation of how life will be in the near future. This, as I said, was built in cooperation with Pepsi and UNICEF. How many people have ever been to the Hall of Presidents? Or have you ever been to Disneyland and seen Abraham Lincoln? The technology, the animatronics for the attraction in Disneyland and in the Hall of Presidents at the Magic Kingdom were also developed for the 1964 World's Fair. Abraham Lincoln was one of Walt Disney's favorite figures in history, and so he wanted to, see if he could duplicate or create movement that looked human and actually carry on a conversation. And so the state of Illinois had President Abraham Lincoln in their pavilion in the 1964 World's Fair. And there's some great stories. If you ever look on YouTube and some of the Imagineering stories about building and getting ready for the 1964 World's Fair, there's some great stories about Abraham Lincoln as far as when he would meet people, and newspapers actually reported, some people actually reported that Abraham Lincoln got off the stage and walked around and met people. Obviously it wasn't true, but just think, 1964, you see something like an animatronic of Abraham Lincoln, it's pretty easy to understand how the stories would run rapid from that. That is the Carousel of Tomorrow.
Whatever you said.
Carousel of Progress. No, that's in that's in the Magic Kingdom in Tomorrowland. Close to here's Space Mountain. The new Tron roller coaster is going to be next to Space Mountain on the other side. The Carousel of Progress is on this side. If you ever take the People Mover, you actually go through the Carousel of Progress building. You don't see the sets, but you go through the building.
I remember watching the Progress where did you say that the seats move or the stage?
The seats move. So you're sitting down and you actually move around the seats, what's another aspect, what's another innovative aspect of that? Think about it. If you have, if the name Carousel of Progress is really multifaceted, because here's your stage, you have 4 sets, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then your seats are actually here, and they're moving around. So what does that mean for crowd control? You actually have 4 different sets of people who can be in the theater at one time. So that was a big innovation, that it was not, 100 people could go in at a time to watch this. 400 people could be in the building watching the show at one time. Okay? Because the way they had it featured is you would start here, rotate around, when you get back to the beginning, you leave, someone else comes in. So there's always someone sitting in those seats watching each scene. Okay, also, and we won't watch the whole thing of this, but pay attention to the animatronics in here. Okay, because I want to show you something here in just a bit. Bless you. Are there any requests of rides that you want to see?
I saw one for Space Mountain, and that's my all-time favorite ride.
Okay, we can watch. I'll tell you, the video of this one is not
It's kind of dark.
as great because it's a dark ride.
I ride pretty much.
I haven't been there since I was like 5, so I kind of want to see it.
So once you get on the ride, it's not as great of a video, but it's still pretty. Oh, and then we'll watch this one. So you can see you look like you're on a space station. One aspect of Disney rides that make them so impressive are the queues. So waiting in line, in a way, becomes an event unto itself, an attraction to itself. And if you ever want to see something interesting, try to find on YouTube this ride with the lights open or the lights on. It's a very small ride that that essentially moves around on itself. However, when you're in the dark, it adds that element of suspense. Also, if you're on the People Mover, you move through here, through this portion of Space Mountain. So you actually see the cars going up on either side of it. The People Mover, remember, was the method people were supposed to travel around the inner city portion of Epcot using. It's been used obviously as a way to promote the attractions in Tomorrowland. So this is what most of the video is like now.
Who's your favorite ride?
But if you want the feeling of it, sometimes I'll sit down with my boys and we'll watch the phone and you can move like this and that if you want to do that. I don't suggest doing that with the computers. What did someone ask?
I asked what was your favorite.
I think my favorite is probably, well, this one looks like the lights might be, oh yeah, the lights are on to a certain extent. I think my favorite is probably Peter Pan because of the memories. As far as the maybe most thrilling ride, there's a ride at Animal Kingdom called Dinosaur, from the movie Dinosaur, and just the way, and we can't really show it up here because it's a dark ride also, it doesn't show up that well. But it is a very, very fun, creative ride with a lot of technology that they invented for that ride. Here, since we've talked about this a few times, here's the people mover. So this is a nice way just to see yourself around Tomorrowland, and it takes you in and through several of the attractions. Remember, Walt Disney and Walt Disney Studios, the corporation, were always looking at ways to promote their stories, to promote their products. This is one example of that. And then obviously, they did make a movie, Tomorrowland. Did anybody see that? I don't think it received very good reviews, but there is a movie for it. This is what his version of Epcot. That is what Walt Disney wanted Epcot to resemble. You can see there's the core, the city core, people living on the outside with monorails running in to the city's core where they could work and play. There's a little bit of So if you're at Disney World, if you're at Magic Kingdom, and you want just a break, this is about a 10-minute ride, where it's pretty easy going, and pretty relaxing just to go around and see everything. Now, I had spoke about the animatronics.
Well, for us, rents
So when this
always
stops,
real good. Every rent got a reputation.
I want to show you. Let's look at this. Here. Here's the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. And look at the difference in the animatronics that are used on this ride as opposed to some of the earlier videos we watched, like Peter Pan. It's a Small World. So again, this is not a very large roller coaster. However, it's very interesting what they do, because kind of in the middle of the roller coaster, you stop for, you go through a show. When Magic Kingdom first opened, they had Snow White's Scary Adventure, which actually was a pretty scary ride for a kid to go on. There are some throwbacks to that in this ride, but look at the faces of the dwarves. You see how they look illuminated? And they more resemble the cartoon faces of the dwarves. One of their advancements is when they create this type of show and they create these animatronics, they're actually blank globes on the front of the characters. Okay, if they have any like noticeable facial features, like the noses on the dwarves, they'll have those. However, with the globe, then they're able to broadcast the face onto the image or onto the surface. So it gives you a more realistic image of the characters. Probably to close out, if I can find it, the best see if so the throwback right here, it's a throwback to the original ride, the animatronic of the Wicked Witch. So now to close out and to show you kind of the evolution of animatronics, here is the new Frozen ride. And actually, you asked about my favorite rides. One of my favorite rides was at Epcot. This used to be called Maelstrom. It was in the Norway Pavilion. And you would go through, it's a boat ride. You would go through and you were like encountered with trolls from myth and everything. However, they repurposed almost the same track, if not the same track, for Frozen. And they told a new story around the Frozen cartoon. So you see the eyes, they're being projected. Any Ratatouille fans? They're constructing a Ratatouille ride in the France Pavilion at Epcot. There's also a rumor about a Mary Poppins attraction in the United Kingdom Pavilion at Epcot. Spurred on by the latest, the Mary Poppins Returns that'll come out at Christmas. See, one of the critiques, there's a Little Mermaid ride in New Fantasyland at Magic Kingdom. See, their faces are very, you can see how it's projected on their faces. But one of the critiques about the Little Mermaid ride is, one, the faces look like they're mannequin or wax faces, so they didn't use this technology. And also, it just retells the story of the cartoon. So in this is a new story where you're going to see Elsa and you're going to her ice palace to celebrate. This is the part on the original ride when you see the troll and then are sent back down the hill. Arendelle. So I'll try to post some of these videos, these pages. Next time we will possibly talk about Walt Disney World a little bit more, but we will also talk about Disneyland and touch on some of the attractions at the other Disney parks outside of the United States as well. And then on April 9th, we're going to be meeting in the conference room again to Skype with Lou Mangello. Any questions? All right. Have a good week. Thank you.